Dr. Sheffi, you have really a wonderful list for risk managers when it comes to risk strategies, recovery strategies, and resiliency engineering strategies, really. Can you talk us through your various strategies that organizations can use?
Sure, thank you. There are basically two fundamental areas, or two fundamental strategies with lots of actions around them that one can think about. One is redundancy, the other one is flexibility. The only two ways that one can recover. Redundancy means several things. For example, redundancy may mean extra capacity. So for example, after the anthrax attack, the US Postal Service had several of its facilities down, yet it could keep going. The mail kept going because the system, because of starting with email, then fax, then paying bill online, the volume of mail has been going down for years. Yet the capacity of the Postal Service was not adjusting at the same rate. So there's significant overcapacity in the system, which means that even though some of the facilities were down, they could continue working. Mm-hmm. Another strategy for creating redundancy is having inventory. Now, when you think about large-scale disruptions that do not happen frequently, to keep inventory to cover all of this is very difficult because it means very large inventory kept for a very long time. Mm-hmm. Most commercial companies just cannot do it. They're not going to be competitive. There are some exceptions when companies can do it, but it is important to have some inventory. And most of the time you have it throughout the supply chain, because you need some time to gather your wits when something bad happens in order to apply other strategy. Then there are, some companies that have a redundant production line. And one thing that I don't even talk much about is having redundant information system. Mm-hmm. Most companies actually have them. While most companies do not have redundant production line and redundant, redundant capacity, most companies have redundant information systems, because no company today can afford the loss of transaction record, customer record, financial record. And by comparison to keeping extra production line or extra plant, this is cheap. It's very inexpensive, so companies do it. It's not an issue. But as I said, to have significant redundancy is actually expensive. And so the next best thing, or maybe the best thing, is to build in flexibility into company operation. So we must say, what is flexibility? The ability to respond quickly to all kinds of events. The essence of flexibility, if you try to operationalize it, is building interchangeability, the ability to interchange. So for example, all Intel plants are identical. For a variety of historical reasons, they're all identically positioned relative to the sun. The hoses are identical. During the SARS epidemic, when they had to close a plant in Southeast Asia, 2 workers were infected there, they were very easy for them to move operation to other plants because they're all identical. And workers are trained in the same task and everything. Then there's a whole issue of what we call risk pooling. Again, it has to do with building a flexibility. For example, until about 7-8 years ago, Intel, maybe more, Intel had 2,000 capacitors and resistors in all its products. Through a large audit, it reduced it to 35. So some of them were over-engineered, but it means that only 35 could go into all its products. So they did not. So some products were selling more, some selling less, some were disrupted, some were not. It's okay. This is the pooling effect. In statistics, it's related to the law of large numbers. Some things go up, some things go down. On the average, the number stays the same. So you didn't have to have a lot of inventory, and you could supply whatever product was needed. Another example is Southwest Airlines that flies only 737s. Their philosophy is that they get disrupted all the time, like every other airline, but they need every pilot to walk into every cockpit and be able to fly. not being checked on the 757, 747, A320, whatever airplane they're using. So that's one of the essence of flexibility. There's another issue, however, beyond redundancy and flexibility. When you try to look at the DNA of a company, and maybe some people call it culture of a company, try to see what makes some companies more resilient than others. And when we try to look into this, it was clear that resilient companies communicate obsessively, all the time. And there are many examples. There are also counter-examples of like JetBlue during February 14th, 2007, during ice storm in New York, when it could not communicate and it had airplane for 3 weeks all over the continent. The CEO lost his job over this, and is an example of how you don't have communication infrastructure. It can hurt you in case of a crisis. Another element of culture is to move decision-making during crisis very low in the organization. So we all know about, people in supply chain management know about Toyota. They use what's called the and-on code. Every worker on the production line can stop the line if they see some quality defect. And what happened is, if they don't stop the line, they discover it late, and then they'll have to fix a whole bunch of cars. If they don't stop the line at all, these cars will get to dealers and get to customers, then have a lot of warranty problems. Even if they don't have warranty problems, they'll have bad reputation for the cars. So discovering at the source, fixing it immediately, clearly the right thing to do. And by now, all manufacturing have adopted the same idea. But it happens in many other areas. The idea is to drive decision-making at the lowest level in the organization, because time is of essence when something happens. So you wanted to drive it down.
Is this influenced by the military? We use a lot of military science in the way that we look at risk and manage crisis and stuff. Or is this something that organizations, because when you're describing, I'm thinking command and control in my mind. Like how do you decentralize, have some central functions, but decentralize the actual execution of that, and they'll allow that autonomy and self-organization?
Well, clearly, I don't know if it's the military science, but it's the military life. When people start shooting at you, you don't call headquarters and say, should I shoot back? I mean, how many bullets should I shoot? Where should I aim?
Yeah.
You respond. I mean, that's,
you have to respond
so
and
clearly,
report back later.
Exactly. You do it. And it's very much related, because there's a crisis when the bullets start flying, you don't ask questions. You have to respond. Exactly. But this is an extreme case when life is in danger. It's clearly time is of essence. You cannot start going up the chain of command and getting instructions back. There are other aspects of culture. One of them is understanding the mission of the organization beyond the minutia day to day. And some companies, and I have in the book a quote from a Southwest Airlines executive saying, we're trying to show the bricklayer that they are building a church. Trying to see what is the main mission of the company, getting everybody on board. Another very interesting example is the difference to experience rather than rank when something bad happens. During a crisis, you find out happening in control towers, in chemical plants, in nuclear plants, in high-risk environments. You see, when something starts to go wrong, usually the workers don't look at the FAA manager in the tower. They look at the controller who's been there for 30 years. And by the way, good management understands it and allows it to happen and actually promotes it. So people share experience, and they don't insist on rank. As we say, in a crisis, experience trumps the rank. Okay. Then the other point is that some organizations are simply good at it because they get disrupted a lot. So
it's good to get sick. Your immune gets stronger.
FedEx and UPS, what doesn't kill me makes me stronger, basically. So organizations like airlines are actually good at it by and large, because they're disrupted all the time. So they have processes for dealing with disruption. This is exactly what we talk about, the high right-hand side of the risk matrix. They're disrupted, but it happens a lot. So some of them are even big, but they have processes to deal with it. They have people who deal with it all the time. So nobody panics. It happens. If you're running an airline, you cannot get excited about a snowstorm. Yeah. I mean, it happens every winter. So interesting organizations that are not disrupted a lot. One of the examples I give is Intel. They actually create disruption or simulate disruption. They have a group that go to a plant anywhere in the world routinely and say, okay, now this supplier of this critical part is out for 2 weeks, what to do? And the plant manager and the team have to go to the whole procedure, qualifying new transportation lane, finding out new suppliers, talking to them, a whole simulated exercise.
Building their tacit knowledge without actually...
Building the knowledge, because they don't disrupt. They are not disrupted all the time. And their fear is that a big disruption will put them in the lower right-hand side, in this black swan case, when people have not seen anything like this before and they start panicking and they start doing the wrong things, and they actually will exasperate the problem. So they try to basically drill them into, but these are unannounced, and
they show up and say, here's 2 hours.
Unannounced, showed up, just do it.
I like that.
So it gets people on their toes, and by the way, bonuses are tied to this.
Wow.
So it's very real.
So is it fair to say when I'm listening to you about flexibility and redundancy and everything in between there, between
interchangeability?
Yep, interchangeability, and is it fair to say just the main theme I'm hearing is just reduce complexity?
Very interesting that you mentioned it. Complexity is an interesting issue. There are many dimensions of yes. You reduce complexity is absolutely a good thing, but it's very hard to do. It's very hard to do because you know about the accordion theory of management.
No.
You have sales that goes and visits customers, and every customer wants a new SKU, stop keeping unit, a new type of product. They want the product in this color, in this packages of 2 or 3 or 4, this side, that side, with this logo, with that logo. And sales are, only happy to oblige. So the number of product grows and grows and grows and grows. Then it becomes unmanageable, and managers can say, okay, cross this, we're not doing this, this don't make. They try to go 80-20 rule and say, okay, this is, 30 products we make money on, the rest we actually lose money on.
Yeah.
Because there's, very little margin and a lot of work on them, and let's just stop doing it. So that's why the accordion, the number of products, the complexity goes up and down, because as operations try to restrict it and sales always tries to grow it. So that's the image of the accordion. It's really interesting. It's like one of my students is starting work on complexity. There have been some work on this. That's not a virgin area, on identifying complexity, how you measure complexity, and how you can... The problem with complexity is as follows. When sales comes and says, we want a new product, a new packaging, a new this, they think that we just went from, the complexity just grew from 150 to 151. It's not true, because the one product influenced all the 150 others. It's actually, it grows by a lot. Every time you add. So what we are trying to do is develop a metric for companies when they introduce a new process, when they introduce a new product, when they introduce a new packaging. How does it influence everything else? And that will be the real metric. So it doesn't grow up by 1%. It may grow up by 5 or 6% when you add a product. But complexity, and by the way, in general, the modern world is becoming more complex. Response time need to be faster. One example, social networks. The company, some supplier of some company does something bad in terms of corporate social responsibility, in terms of environmental sustainability, and before you know it, half the world knows about it, and people start demonstrating, and it can happen overnight. This used to take months to organize people to do something. It happens overnight now. So, managers are faced with
increasing complexity,
increasing challenges.
I think, I was reading where, they were saying, humans are only really good at things that are close in proximity and close in time. But that's not the way it works today. I could do something and it could affect across the world. I may not see the effects for a year from now.
Exactly.
I have no relationship with that cause and effect anymore.
Absolutely. The classic thing is global warming.
Global warming, great example.
I mean, you're talking about things that in 50 years, could be catastrophic changes.
Yeah.
But what I do today doesn't seem like it has any effect or anything. So there are things like this.